What's up, Kaspa fam? What if you intend to play the normal Italian where you have to play knight c6? Now, white plays pawn to c3. Can we still play pawn to f5? Well, first, this is not very clear. This is no longer the Lucchini Gambit. This pawn to f5 strategy here doesn't work due to the upcoming pawn to d4, not to mention that white can even take on g8 right away. Point is, after we take back, now they go pawn to d4. And even if we take back and they take back and we give a check, they can easily defend this position. I mean, f takes e4 looks attractive, but what are we going to do after moves like bishop g5? We need to start developing our pieces, and then there's knight e5. Queen h5 is also coming. If pawn to g6, for example, there are even moves like knight g4. There's just too much pressure. As black, you don't want to continue playing like this, giving white more initiative. So, you don't want to play pawn to f5. If white plays pawn to c3, frankly speaking, so what now? Maybe there's something else that we can do against the c3 line. Well, here I propose that you go knight f6, attacking the undefended e pawn. If white continues with pawn to d4, you simply want to take like that. Yes, there's one move that looks dangerous at first sight, which is e5. But the main equalizing move in these kinds of positions is pawn to d5. For example, after d5 and pawn takes knight, you can simply take that powerful bishop, and this has been proven to be better for black, theoretically speaking, due to the space advantage and the bishop pair. If f takes g7, you simply go rook g8. Now you have a new point of attack, perhaps an indication that white should not cast a shot. If cd, you can go queen e7 first, getting rid of the queens if you like, or just take that pawn. It's free. I mean, if knight takes, you're going to take back with your queen or your bishop. It's up to you. If you want to keep queens on the board, you go bishop takes. And after cast a shot, you go queen f6. Rook e1 check can always be met with bishop e6. It's just a matter of time before you castle long. So this has been proven to be awesome for black. Never should you be afraid of pawn to e5 in the Italian game. Just go pawn to d5 and then oversimplify the game like that. I mean, even if white plays queen e2 here, you can just go bishop e6. That's the whole idea. Yeah, there are those lines where they go knight g5 trying to take your bishop, and after pawn takes, they win a free bishop like that. But we are one tempo ahead. Here we can just go queen takes f6, so that if knight takes comes, we even take back with our queen. Queen takes, pawn takes, and lo, just like that, we have a clear passed pawn. If pawn takes, we take back with a knight. This is even worse, because next we might even win the poor rook. So once again, e5, d5 seals the deal. By the way, this is called the Greco Gambit. Once again, we are looking at this weird c3 Italian, where I recommended the move knight f6. Normal development, just attacking the e4 pawn. Of course, they are going to play d4 in this position. You don't want to retreat the bishop, you just want to take on d4 to oversimplify the game. And if pawn to e5, once again, you go d5. Now, what if white takes on d4 with their pawn? First, you will just have a normal game from here. Go bishop b4 check. Checks are always good and forcing moves. If bishop d2, by the way, you can just take on e4. Queen e2, queen e7. Bishop takes, knight takes. There is nothing white can do to attack your two knights. Again, if queen e2, you have pawn to d5 or queen e7. If they play something like queen b3, again you have queen e7 and a discovery check coming. I've seen people playing bishop takes first. You can just take back. Yes, they will take back. And now you go pawn to a5. You start buying time on the queen before you develop other pieces and probably castle long or short. All these are just possibilities of what you can do if you do the right thing. After c takes d4 and bishop b4 check, white doesn't really need to play bishop d2. I mean, if they do that, you have knight takes e4. Remember, sometimes you can just play queen e7, not to complicate things, or just take that bishop. If they play the top played move knight c3, once again, you have knight takes e4. You have all the reasons to take that pawn. If they play queen e2, you always have queen e7. This is better for black. Castle shot, knight takes c3, also attacking the queen. Queen takes, you just take back with your knight. Pawn takes, now you are attacking the rook. Rook b1, bishop a5. They can't pin your knight due to bishop attack. Rook attack, pawn to b6. Still preventing rook e1, pin. Pap, bishop g5. Maybe you go knight g6 and castle shot. Or play the right move, pawn to f6 here. Why not? Because once the bishop moves, first you have bishop s6. Bishop takes, bishop takes. attacking 2 rooks for nothing. So once again, if you see the c3 Italian on the board instead of the d3 Italian, don't be tempted to play the Lucchini Gambit, please. If you do that, you are going to lose. There are moves like bishop takes g8. So you want to play principal chess, remember to start with knight f6. It comes with an attack, and if they play d4, you simply take. These are the only opening moves you need to remember and memorize if need be. Sometimes after knight c3, feel free to take that knight immediately. And this is when you take on e4. This is the simplest you can do to avoid all those tensions. Again, queen e2 can easily be met with pawn to d5. Sometimes queen e7 works. Point is this, they can't be bishop takes due to queen takes. Even if they castle short, you're just going to castle short and there's no pin. So don't be afraid to play pawn to d5 in these kinds of lines. So after knight takes e4, you may see moves like castle short. Instead of castling short, you want to play pawn to d5. If you miss a move, white may gain initiative by playing pawn to d5 themselves. You don't want this to happen. Of course, here you can play knight e7, because after rook e1, you still have knight f6, and after bishop g5, of course, you can simply go knight g6. But what if they start pushing their h-pawn and that? You don't want to risk your chess like that. Of course, h4 can be met with h6, or simply pawn to d6, paving the way for your light square bishop. After that, you go back to e5. It's like you are just giving back a pawn in this position. You don't want to play like this, even though it is playable. So this is why I'm encouraging to play pawn to d5 as quickly as you can before white plays pawn to d5. Sometimes after knight takes e4 in this particular position, of course white may play pawn to d5, but the difference is you are quick in development. Knight e7, white doesn't have rook e1 yet, so even if they play moves like castle short, you are just in time to play pawn to d6, because rook e1 can easily be met with pawn to f5 if you so wish, or knight c5. You don't always need to go back to the king side due to that pawn advancement that we saw earlier. Bishop g5 in this position, pawn to f6. The reason why you played pawn to d6 was to close the line, to block the light squared bishop, so you can easily castle short on the next move. If bishop e3, maybe you play pawn to b6 first, so that if they take, you take back with your b pawn and castle short safely. So that's how to counter the Greco's attack that may arise from the c3 Italian. You just go knight f6 once again. If they play pawn to d3, feel free to go d6 and castle short. That will just be a passive game for white. d4 is more aggressive in that it forces you to respond with correct moves. Bishop d2, you can just take. Knight c3, you can just take, to oversimplify things. And to conclude, after e4, e5, knight f3, bishop c5, bishop c4, and knight c6. The other move you might see that doesn't really allow you to play the Lucchini Gambit is simply knight c3 instead of pawn to c3. Once again, if you play pawn to f5, you are kind of throwing the game back to white. If you think about it, first they have bishop takes g8 and you're going to mess up your structure. They can even play pawn to d4 here. Even if you take, they simply have knight d5 just in time. Even if you take on e4 again, guess what? This time white can even castle short, knowing that e takes f3 runs into rook e1. It's all about your king's safety in most of these lines. Knight e7 doesn't help here due to queen takes f3. Your king is still on the center. So you don't want to run into these funny traps, you guys. That's why even in the knight c3 line, you want to forget about pawn to f5. The Lucchini Gambit works perfectly in the d3 Italian. Anyway, so if knight c3 is played, again just go knight f6 to finish your development. And these are the most common lines. When you see these two knights, just know white is going to castle short or play pawn to d3 first, after which you go d6. Normal chess, if bishop g5, you go h6, trying to see what they are up to. Bishop h4, you know they want to play knight d5, right? So you can go pawn to g5. This is one move that is so underrated, yet so useful. Remember, you haven't yet castled short, so you are at liberty to play pawn to g5. If that's the only defensive move you have. Yeah, sometimes you can even play this move, pawn to g5, even if you have already castled short. But anyway, at this point, you can even start thinking of oversimplifying the game with moves like bishop e6. a6 was also playable, by the way. Point is, if bishop takes, they just helped you to put a pawn on a better square, not allowing knight d5 in the near future. If they play bishop g3, you can even play a5, queen d7, prepare to castle long, and all those things. So that would just be a normal game. By the way, this is the 4 knights Italian. In closing, remember my famous quote: if your gambit doesn't work, or if things don't go as planned, play chess.